Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
I don't think that in my entire life I've played something quite like MechWarrior 2. Nowadays, to some, it probably looks like a muddy polygonal mess. And these people would be somewhat right. Yes, there certainly were games that did look a whole lot better at the time, but this just wasn't what MechWarrior 2 was about.
Enemy aircraft destroyed.
There is a reason that this game is still considered one of, if not the best mech simulation game ever released. And yes, though I go on constantly about a load of console mech sims, this game does trump almost all of them in terms of experience. If you're watching this channel, you've probably played it, and if you haven't, let me clue you in on a few of the reasons why you should.
Image enhanced. Engaged.
So you might be wondering why MechWarrior 2 is abandonware if it's such a good game. That's a good question. Activision had both developed and published MechWarrior 2. With the original MechWarrior, Activision was still only the publisher, with the game being instead developed by Dynamics. FASA wasn't too interested in further MechWarrior games at the time, so the license was sort of dropped. Dynamics wouldn't suffer too much though, as they would later be bought out by Sierra and go on to create battletech, Mission Force, and Star Siege. Star Siege would eventually evolve into the Tribe games, and if you were born in the 90s, you probably are well aware of that series. With MechWarrior releasing in 1989 and still selling units years later, it just made sense to develop a follow-up. What Activision's actual intentions were at the time, to either cash in while people still cared about MechWarrior, or to continue the series out of love for the IP, I don't know. But it would end up with them picking up the battletech license for another go at the series, and with Dynamics out of the picture, an internal team would instead be formed to develop it. There were problems, however, due to Activision's development staff coming and going during development. MechWarrior 2 would be stilted. This would result in a massively slow development cycle that would push the game from a 1994 release date all the way to 1997, which even today is a massive setback. There are rumors that FASA was simply tired of Activision trying to promote the incomplete version, therefore pulling the battletech license, but somehow still leaving Activision with the ability to publish anything under the MechWarrior tag. However, I couldn't find any concrete evidence of this aside from a few mentions on user boards or videos on YouTube. There are a lot of contradictions as well, seeing as MechWarrior 2 is considered one of the stronger ties to BattleMech lore, even going so far as to roughly follow the source book, The Falcon and the Wolf. Whatever the case, Activision would lose rights in 1998, a slew of other developers would work on the MechWarrior IP over time. Zipper Interactive would develop the third main entry, with Hasbro publishing it. MechWarrior would be traded off to numerous publishers and development studios until finally landing in the hands of Piranha Games, who currently hold the rights until 2025. FASA itself would be bought out by Microsoft in 2001, with numerous aspects of the BattleTech IP being handed off to a set of different owners as time went on. It's likely that due to the complicated history of rights and licensing for BattleMech and MechWarrior, it simply left older series entries in a difficult place legally. It certainly is beneficial to us all being able to download the game freely as abandonware, however, there is a part of me that pines for a more functional re-release, something a lot of, but not enough games of this era have been receiving lately. For this video, I've managed to get all three major versions of the game working, the DOS and Windows version, Battle Pack, and Titanium versions, and let me tell you, it wasn't easy. Changes between versions cover everything from simple graphical updates, such as added textures or performance enhancements for certain graphics cards, all the way to special audio options. It can be a bit daunting when you're first diving into the tangled web of MechWarrior 2 releases, because there are subsets of each of these major versions as well. And it doesn't help that there are more than enough conflicting solutions on the internet, making the whole operation of installing these titles incredibly challenging. Since the Pentium MechWarrior 2 is the most stable aside from DOS, the majority of the footage you'll be seeing is related to that version. I will be getting to the others later and showing a few of the major differences, so anyone interested in the games might know what they're getting into. Though, as it stands, while the Pentium version isn't the most graphically sophisticated, it plays incredibly well and features certain elements omitted from the BattleTech and Titanium versions. Of course, at the end of this video, I'll also be looking at the Saturn and PlayStation versions, so you can get a better idea of what those are about as well.
Enemy detected. Targeting. Targeting.
The story of MechWarrior 2 seems rather simple in concept. A conflict has arisen between the Jade Falcon and Wolf tribes. The game is split into 2 stories, allowing you to play as either tribe. Menus are fully interactive, and clicking on whichever side you wish to play for prompts a small opening FMV that clues you in on the motives and mentality of your chosen tribe.
We are Clan Wolf, children of Kerensky. We carry the honor of his name on our shoulders as our fathers did before.
There is more to it though. Every mission you take has a tab where you can see the situation, providing a page or 2 of the story at hand. Not only that, completing a mission and clicking the Aftermath tab will show what your actions accomplished. It's novelistic, that's for certain, and I'm pretty sure that if these parts were compiled, it would easily form a novella or short novel for either faction. However, I will warn you that it's very much in the vein of 80s and 90s sci-fi novels, meaning that the story rather shamelessly dives into its universe without caring who is or isn't actually acclimated. You won't find any straight man here or exposition. Instead, think something along the lines of the extended Dune universe, only with mechs.
Father, the sleeper has awakened!
Now, MechWarrior is far from the original in almost every way, though it does share one major similarity: the controls. This is a full keyboard sort of game. That is, unless you happen to have a legacy PC with a functional joystick, lucky you, and or one of the very expensive VR helmets that were compatible with the game. So if you're playing one of those $200 75 or 65% keyboards, you aren't going to be able to play this, because you're absolutely going to need the numpad. And of course, don't even consider a controller. What's wrong with you? This is a mid-90s PC game, and you should know better. MechWarrior 2 has by far the most complex control scheme I've ever personally experienced. If you're new to this, you might as well throw out everything you know about gaming controls from the last 20 years or so. This is what simulation is all about, and if you're like me, you've probably been spoiled to death by standardized control schemes. Here, you'll basically be controlling a mech as realistically as possible. If you're all about that Steel Battalion controller, this isn't the same, but it's the keyboard equivalent. You'll have to learn it all. Thankfully, there is a fleshed out tutorial that teaches you everything about the controls. It even has its own unique FMV menu. Trust me, you'll want to do this because the oddest part of MechWarrior 2's massively complex control scheme is that it is incredibly rewarding to master. Figuring out all the game's interior functions allows you to develop strategies and methods to tackle situations in your own way. I personally opted for a lot of long-range encounters where I took advantage of the game's excellent wireframe vision mode. Some might find more fun in taking a more direct approach, or be completely insane and deal with encounters through the game's third-person perspective mode. Whatever the case, every control setup carries over between mechs, meaning that your methods transfer as well. The currency system of the original game has, thank God, been removed completely. In place, there is a mech lab that allows you to select from certain mechs that fall under a tonnage value for the mission. Each has variants to choose from, and expert players can opt for fully customizing their loadouts. Since I literally played MechWarrior 2 5 times for this video, I opted for the presets. It worked well for me, that was, unless the mech design happened to emit laser weaponry. At that point, ammo management becomes an absolute must. Most missions require players to protect or destroy an objective, with absolute freedom as to how this is done. Of course, there is a lot of extra variation thrown into situations and environments, so the game doesn't feel so straightforward. I especially enjoyed missions where inspection was required, as they allowed me to use a mech's extended functions. And when an escort mission came along, I never felt that I was against odds I wouldn't be able to overcome. There was always a sense that if I couldn't get through something, a change in mech or tactics might turn the tide. There are a load of interesting environments too, and despite the Pentium version looking a bit basic, I absolutely felt myself connected to the environments at hand. It did help that, in my mind, I envisioned the environment around me as more of a rendering put forth by my mech systems, and I really enjoyed using the game's wireframe vision mode during combat, and whilst traveling dusty desert environments. If I was being honest, I don't think a game has immersed me so fully in its world like MechWarrior 2 did. There wasn't a moment that I didn't feel like I was preparing, making careful approaches, and always thinking about what what I'd do next if an enemy encounter came along. And if you find yourself more interested in the combat than the story, you can set up custom scenarios in Trials of Grievance as well. It's an extra mode that will let you form a party of mechs and go against the AI. The mode is pretty basic, and unless you find yourself lucky enough to catch the rare games still played by communities using NetMech, this is the closest thing you'll get to MechWarrior 2's multiplayer in 2024. When it comes to music, I have to say that I really enjoyed the ambient tracks that looped as I played through missions. They aren't here to craft pulse-pounding action scenarios. Instead, the goal seems to have been to build atmosphere as you struggle against rivals upon vast and desolate planets. It's somber to say the least. Now, I'm not the best at describing music in any technical way. Many have praised it over the years, and at the time it was said to have set a new standard in game music. Though, despite the praise, it never actually got an official release. For me, it just felt like it sat in the right location sonically. Somehow, these little music files help bring something visually bare to life. MechWarrior 2 is an excellent game that I can't recommend enough. There isn't any surprise that so many OEM versions would be released as time went on. Activision truly cashed in on the game's popularity, making sure everyone could play it, so long as they bought the version that suited the system at hand. The true negatives of the experience, however, would actually come with Activision's apparent upgrades in further releases. MechWarrior 2's Battle Pack Edition doesn't seem like it would be different in any way. On disc, it includes a fancy new installer with video, both the new Battle Pack version and the original versions, Ghost Bear's Legacy, and the NetMech client. It's a great little collection, and if it had just been the original versions, I think people might have been grateful just to play these games as is. However, Activision decided to put in some extra work and tack on textures, a new HUD, and a few apparent technical improvements.
Enemy mech destroyed.
Now, I really didn't like any of this, and aside from a short few hours, I quickly went back to the Pentium edition. To me, the added textures and recolored landscape really doesn't look too amazing. If anything, it pushed the game out of its simulation feeling, at least for me. The world felt cheap now, and all of the dusty, strange, and mysterious things had been replaced with more colorful, yet somehow basic representations. As you can see from what I'm showing you, the game loses a lot of its scope with these changes, but perhaps the worst of it is the HUD change, which felt extremely lazy. In the original versions, a readout showed an outline of the exact mech you were piloting. This outline would show damage inflicted on the individual parts of every mech. Now it's replaced with a readout that isn't the mech you are controlling, which bugged me immensely. Not only that, the heat meter has been changed for the worse. I didn't see what was wrong with the original gauge at all, this just felt lazy. A few graphical changes didn't make this version better, it just didn't feel right, and personally, I don't suggest giving it a go at all. Not unless this is the experience you had when you were younger and want to relive it out of curiosity, otherwise I'd just skip it entirely. Since I apparently enjoy tormenting myself through decades-old dysfunctional software, I made the terrible decision of trying to get the Titanium trilogy working for this video. It features textures, and being a spoiled brat, I figured that I just had to have this feature. My mistake. This endeavor cost me literal days as I fiddled with numerous VirtualBox programs running Windows 98. Eventually I'd have to use Windows 95 and an emulated 3DFX Voodoo 3 graphics card to get the game working. This takes a lot more footwork than simply changing a few settings. Drivers were still required, leading me to track down an ISO of the install image to get things working properly. Thankfully, this didn't take too long due to so many archiving sites keeping these old CDs alive. I don't think I've ever appreciated preservation more than when I was trying to get the Titanium edition of MechWarrior 2 going. Sadly, it really wasn't worth it. The Titanium edition is notorious for being an absolute disappointment with loads of glitches and performance issues. It does have its own unique textures, different than the Battle Pack. There's even a skybox, but the pain here isn't worth the sacrifice. Here the same horrible HUD from Battle Pack remains, and the game absolutely crumbles when action begins. That and the AI sometimes just runs around in circles.
Online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Worse yet, the Titanium edition also robbed me of my favorite function in the game, emitting the wireframe view for no apparent reason. No matter how much I pressed W, it just wasn't there. There is actually a story of how this came to be, with Activision giving little support and funding to the small team responsible for this version. The company had apparently been developing many titles at the time, leaving MechWarrior 2's Titanium Edition off to the side. Honestly, hearing all these stories, I did think it would have been much worse. Instead, it's just a wonky version of a good game. There are little differences between the PlayStation and Saturn versions of MechWarrior 2. For the most part, they are interchangeable when it comes to story and content. But before I get into that, do note that my footage is going to vary just a little here, since my PS1 copy is being ran through an emulator with some enhancements, while the Saturn version is original footage. MechWarrior 2's console versions are more or less their own experience. Because of both systems' limitations, port developer Quantum Factory decided that it was best to build a new game from the ground up. It has a bunch of little things from the PC versions, retaining open FMV sequences and the same mech designs. There are missions featured from the PC port, but they have been altered to make the game faster and more arcade-like. According to project coordinator Brian Clark, instead of doing a sim game, we're making the crossover into a console-type game, where it's more action-oriented and fast-paced, and also doing things like adding power-ups, so it's more of an arcade experience. We're also adding more enemy mechs to each mission so that there's a certain carnage element to the whole thing. This explains why the game ended up the way it was. Yes, it's very much more of an action game than a simulation at this point, but it does include its own versions of maps and a slew of new missions for console players. The controls have also been sensibly designed so that movement and combat aren't too hard to grasp after a few moments. However, I will say that the Saturn version has incredibly finicky controls in comparison to the PlayStation version. While I'm undoubtedly a fan of the Sega's ill-fated Genesis follow-up, I have to say that this really hurts the experience. It's hard to explain, but the Saturn port just feels way too sensitive. While the PC versions would include novelistic before and after segments that would explain the storyline, MechWarrior 2 on console simplifies this by instead giving a briefer interpretation of the scenario happening between missions. Certainly this isn't so involved, but that's okay. I was a kid when I played this, and I was barely even aware that there was a story. Instead, I was more concerned with piloting a Timberwolf because I'd fallen in love with the design after seeing it in Mech Commander on PC. Another major change was the soundtrack, which would contain more pumping rock-based tunes, rather than the ambient sci-fi soundtrack of the PC version. Either suits either version, and I'd say complements the gameplay styles either is supposed to represent. If it actually seems like I'm skipping over aspects such as the actual storyline, the game's multiple campaigns, and so forth, it's because the vast majority of those are presented in full with the PC version. I'm certainly not going to compare this to any of the additions seen on PC. Instead, I'd say that the PlayStation version complements the PC version in its own way. It would certainly be more enjoyable than the Battle Pack or Titanium versions. At least in my own opinion, you're free to feel the way you do. That's just how I feel after experiencing all of these versions side by side. For me, this was the first time in decades that I was able to play this game. As a kid, I was more of a fan of Mech Commander, as I was playing a lot of Red Alert when I finally came across a copy. So my opinion up until now has been limited because I just didn't have the right amount of experience to say anything about MechWarrior 2. But now, I can say that it's hands down a legendary game for reasons that go beyond what I'm capable of saying in this video. In fact, it probably goes beyond what anyone could actually say. Instead, I fully suggest that you go out and experience this gem for all it is worth. Keeping the game in the oven for an extra 3 years certainly resulted in one of the best experiences someone can have with a mech in a game. I don't exactly mean a tabletop game, so battletech fans, please spare me. I will be getting around to that eventually, once I have the money, people, and time to do so. I'm Kei-Nova, and thank you for watching the video. Like and subscribe if you want to support the channel. I'm all about mechs here. If you're already a subscriber, thank you for watching, and I appreciate the fact you got this far. You're awesome, and thank you so much for continuously supporting what I do here.